welcome to the show. I appreciate you tuning in for another brand new review. So, what's in store for you here tonight? Folks, we are just about done with season 2 of Mayfair Witches. We're down to our last 2 episodes, and tonight we are talking the penultimate episode, A Tangled Web. Let's not waste any time. Let's jump right on into things. So, in the previous episode, we're left off with Rowan being tricked by Ian's son Hamish and locked away under the compound at which everybody is currently residing in. Now, Rowan thought she was getting through to Hamish and was going to be able to broker some kind of deal to help get Lasher away from Ian and his family back to New Orleans. But it turns out, obviously, Hamish was working for his father, and there's still more trickery at play to keep Rowan away from Lasher. And ultimately, what Ian feels is betraying the Scottish Mayfairs here and using their power for their own. But this ends up revealing more secrets to Rowan instead, because when she's trapped into the compound, it eventually leads her to Ian's wife, who offers Rowan a vial of Lasher's blood. Now remember, the whole idea here was that they can get Lasher back, or at least some of Lasher's blood. They can get back to the Mayfair house in New Orleans, and Rowan could free JoJo from the thrall that she placed her in. But we obviously know that it was never going to be that simple. There is that bond between Rowan and Lasher, and she's not just going to leave with a vial of his blood. Additionally, we know that Moira wants Lasher dead as well too. So this can't be as simple as leaving Lasher to Ian and everybody goes about their day. And obviously, Rowan doesn't go for the deal that if she gets the Lasher's blood and that vial presented to her, she's headed back to New Orleans. Instead, she demands to actually go and see Lasher. And in turn, we actually find out a lot more about Lasher as well. Now, we had seen the flashbacks all over season 1 and about what we thought was Lasher's first emergence to like old ancestors of the Mayfair clan, that they summoned him, he helped them get revenge, and the whole idea was to help him come corporeal through the 13th witch, which was going to end up being Rowan. But as we find out here in this episode, Lasher actually at one time was already human. He was already on our plane. He was born out of wedlock to a Scottish queen and to a witch queen, thus creating the Taltos. And his blood, which we found out have all these magical abilities, have the ability to literally like bring life out of things that are dead. And we see an example of that through Lasher's previous life, to where his blood helps to bring back his father's burnt down kingdom. And Lasher ends up becoming a priest and ends up bringing this good fortune amongst the people of his lands. But of course, Lasher wants a family of his own. And while he does eventually die, the whole idea is that he wanted to be reborn and that he had some memories of this human life, and he was seeking a way to be brought back to our plane so that he could again like continue this work and this path of good he's been leading. And that's such an interesting twist to come out of all of this, because Lasher's been presented in such an evil light over the course of this series, even when he's finally been made real. The whole thing we've been watching for a big part of this season was him kill a number of Mayfair women due to the sexual desires of his. And again, most of these have been unwillingly. He doesn't want to actually go about doing it. And Lasher is actually like very quick to say that this episode as well too, that he doesn't want to hurt anybody else. He doesn't want to bring pain to anybody else either. And it's a discovery for him, for Rowan, for Sip, for a lot of people finding out that Lasher actually is supposed to be this force of good. And I myself, as a viewer, have a tough time dealing with that as well, because everything that's been shown to us, whether or not Lasher has been innocent in all of that, I've stated that I don't know if he can easily just walk away from all this and everything's just suddenly good. Like, there's a lot here to have to atone for what he did. But that's point blank what we're looking at, is that Lasher is supposed to be a force of good. The Taltos are looking to spread good fortune amongst everybody else that's out here. And Lasher begs Rowan basically that if you really do want what's best for me and you're looking to take care of me, that you'll stay and attend my wedding. And it puts Rowan in this very interesting place, because Rowan obviously wants to get Lasher out of there. Rowan doesn't want Lasher dead. but she also doesn't want whatever these plans end up turning out to be with Ian and his family, who are obviously going to use Lasher for these very evil purposes. And I have to imagine that the idea is not to keep Lasher and his bride alive, that they're going to keep having them bear children, but the idea is that they don't need Lasher once that process begins. That's my guess with that. Let me know in the comment section if you think something different is coming out of this here. And on the other side of things, you know, Ian and Cortland had this reunion with all of Rowan and her crew obviously showing up at Ian's estate here. And Ian's had this idea that Cortland and the New Orleans Mayfairs are trying to get Lasher back for their own comeuppance so that they can gain their own power. And obviously there's a little bit of that in there, but ultimately it's more so they're looking to use their power or use Lasher's power for more good means, whereas Ian and his family, we don't know how far deranged they're going with this power once they get it. And we find out that there was some kind of deal being brokered here to where Julian was going to take over the body of Ian's son Hamish. And instead, after finding out that Lasher has gifted Cortland immortality, Julian has decided to take over his body instead and traps Cortland inside of his Victrola. And now Julian is out and about. He has possessed Cortland's body, and the only person who's aware of this is Ian as they keep this charade up. And I think the idea here is that now that the plan has succeeded, because Lasher does get married to Imelep, this ceremony does end up going through, and there's a lot more revelations coming up from this. But I have to imagine the idea is to send Julian as Cortland back to New Orleans to basically take Cortland's position, and ultimately Julian and Ian have all this power, whether it's in Scotland or whether it's in New Orleans. They have the combined power of all the Mayfairs. So I have to imagine that's what's at play at this point. But it was interesting, though, that Ian still seems to show some reservations about Julian being out in this world. So we'll see what ends up going with that here in the last episode. But it's interesting the point that Ian's not necessarily as on board as it would seem that he would be with this. Finally, over on the Talamasca side here, Sip is officially made head of the New Orleans office. But not only that, we've seen a couple vampires this season thus far of Mayfair Witches, giving us a connection to the Immortal Universe and more specifically Interview with the Vampire. And I talked about how we didn't necessarily need direct connections, direct references to it, because everything we've seen in Interview with the Vampire doesn't really have any kind of cross-contamination, anything that's going over with the world of Mayfair Witches, and vice versa. There's not really much that's going on here with Mayfair Witches that would have anything to do with Interview with the Vampire. But we actually did get a direct reference in this one here, as Sip is talking about Daniel Malloy's book with the rest of the Talamasca officers and how they should deal with that. Because remember, we know that Malloy did end up publishing the interview that he does with Louis, and that it's a whole case of whether or not people are accepting it as fact or fiction. And Sip gives the idea that they're supposed to just challenge it as a work of fiction. Don't discredit, make it up as something that it couldn't possibly be true, which we did hear a little bit about at the tail end of the previous season of Interview with the Vampire. So I have to wonder whether we might actually see Cyprien play maybe a bit of a role in the upcoming new season that's going to be focused on the vampire Lestat. Very, very curious to see how that's going to end up working out. But why this gets interesting, and while all paths are converging here in Scotland, Sip is asked to take a look at a Taltos body to find some memories here, suss out what he can so they can figure out what the true connection to Lasher ultimately is. And they find out that the body that Sip is investigating is actually Lasher's previous body when he had been human for the first time. And so Sip is able to detect all these memories and everything that Lasher had gone through. And this leads him to Scotland, to where they're going to find where this body had died in the first place, and hopefully get more answers about the Taltos, about Lasher, about what everybody ultimately wants from all of this. Now, again, all paths are converging. With one episode left at this point, we now know what everybody is after. We have to look at Lasher in a different way that we've been looking at him this entire season. And it's really, really hard to tell what would be considered the best outcome for all of this at this point. Because Ian and his family are not just going to leave Lasher alone. And even though Lasher has now been wed and his wife is already presumably pregnant, considering that ceremony that they had, I have to imagine that everything is going to come to a very big battle, very big magical battle in our final episode next week. So I'm curious how y'all been feeling about season 2 of Mayfair Witches so far. We're going to wrap things up here next week. This has been fun to follow along here, but let me know what you're thinking of this season here thus far with it. Are you happy with our finally revealed motivations of Lasher? Does that match up with what you were hoping was going to come out of this? Let me know in the comment section, y'all. And of course, hit that subscribe button as we got more great reviews coming your way here, folks. We're going to head back into Penny Dreadful very soon here, first season of that. And of course, countless movie reviews coming your way, folks. Don't want you to miss any of that. Make sure to get subscribed to my link tree at linktr.ee/tscarymovie. If you get subscribed, that's going to give you access to the YouTube page, the video versions of the show, to your favorite podcasting platforms, the audio-only versions of the show, to my Letterboxd page for written reviews and movie rankings throughout the year, to my TikTok page for full episodes, movie news, and movie premieres, to my Twitch page for my horror gaming, and my Fangoria shop page. You can enjoy a 20% discount off anything in the Fangoria shop. Take advantage of that, folks. Hit that subscribe button because, again, I got more great news and reviews and everything for you here in the world of horror. But that's going to do it for us tonight here, folks. I appreciate you tuning in. My name is T. We've been talking scary movies. Stay scared.